Well, hello and welcome. I'm Leah from Darwin Textiles, and today we're going to sew your new favorite pair of drawstring shorts. I just know it. To sew along with me, go ahead and grab my new sewing pattern, the Saltwater Shorts, over at charliedarwintextiles.com/patterns. These shorts are actually just one part of a two-piece set. They pair exceptionally well with the saltwater shirt, and you can purchase the patterns separately or together as a bundle deal. Now, the short sewing pattern currently comes in 9 body sizes up to 51 inches or 130 centimeters in the hips. I find that this is an incredibly gender fluid sewing pattern. So I've made these shorts for both male and female bodies, and they honestly are a home run no matter whose little booty is strutting them around town. The best part, I think, is that you can really customize them to your personal style. So I actually have 4 variations that you can choose from. There's having front pockets versus no front pockets, a ruffled hem or a straight cuff hem, and then anyone can decide if they want to put the square butt pocket on their butt. And then you can make them even more fun and unique by choosing different colored fabrics for the different pattern pieces and color blocking like I did for this pair right here. I find that the saltwater shirt and shorts are both so well suited for adventures big and small, whether you're going hiking, kayaking, biking, larking, whatever that is. They are built for adventure, but they also are so cozy that you could easily fall asleep in them and wear them as pajamas. We are going to make sure that we finish all of our seams and reinforce all of our seams on our pockets so that they're truly built with durability and built for an adventurous lifestyle. All right, so go ahead and grab your pattern, get jazzed up, and I'll show you how to make these shorts. Once you've consulted the size chart and you got your pattern downloaded in your preferred size, then print it out at 100% custom scale. And then you can assemble the pages by overlapping them at the edges, but without trimming them at all. You can check out my other YouTube video for exactly how to do this in a little bit more detail. Now cut out the pattern, then calculate how much to adjust it for your body height. Now the inseam of the shorts is about 7 inches long as is, including the ruffle or the straight cuff. As far as determining the length, I typically refer people to my height adjustment calculator, which you can find here. But for something like shorts, I actually really recommend that you just look at a pair of shorts you already own and see what the inseam and the rise is and make some judgment calls based on what you feel would be most comfortable as far as the length and the height of the shorts. Just note that if you lengthen or shorten your shorts at all, then you're also going to need to make that same adjustment on your front pocket pieces if you're doing view A or B. Just add or subtract that length from the bottom of your pocket piece. Before you get started on cutting your fabric, especially if you're working with linen or cotton, these fabrics that wrinkle so easily, you just want to iron it so there's no wrinkles and it's laying straight and flat. Then go ahead and position your pattern pieces so that the arrows are running parallel to the selvage edge. All right, once we have all of our shorts pattern pieces cut out of our fabric, we can go ahead and get started on the sewing. We have several different pattern pieces here. We have 2 of our shorts back pieces, 2 shorts front. I'm making the front pockets, so I have 2 pocket front pieces, 2 pocket front binding pieces cut on the straight grain. Then I have my 2 ruffle strips for the hem because I'm going to be doing view A. But I will be showing view B with the straight hem on a second pair of shorts later in this tutorial. I have 2 long pieces for my waist ties, that drawstring, and then I have my long rectangle for my waistband. And lastly, I have a square for my butt pocket. We're going to start first on our waist ties. I like to get this stuff just out of the way right from the start. This is going to be a drawstring that runs all the way through from the front, around the back, and back to the front again. So we need to connect these to make it one long piece. So I'm layering my two drawstring pieces on top of each other, right sides facing, and I'm going to stitch with 1/2 inch seam allowance down this short edge right here. Now I'm going to press that seam open with my iron, and now we're going to basically be creating double fold bias tape. Now, if you have a bias tape maker, these things are very handy, and you could just feed your fabric through and it'll fold it for you. If you don't have one of those, then what we need to do is just fold our entire strip in half lengthwise with wrong sides facing. Now, open that fold back up, and we're going to meet our raw edges in the center. So I'm going to fold my bottom raw edge in towards that center fold and my top raw edge in towards that same center fold. So those raw edges are meeting right in the center. You can try and fold them both at once or just do one at a time. And you're basically going to go down your entire strip, folding them both into the center. I'm not going to be that noble. I'm going to use my bias tape maker and feed the fabric through because it just goes that much easier. Now we're just going to fold our whole strip in half lengthwise again. You might still have a crease there from last time, but just to really cement that into place, go over it with your iron one more time. So we're folding all of those raw edges inside of this last fold here, taking our 2-inch strip down to a 1/2 inch strip. Now I forgot to do this at the beginning, but what you want to do is just to get a cleaner edge here on the end of your strip is to unfold everything real quick at the end and fold that short edge down about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, and then redo your folds right there just to tuck in those raw edges at the very end of your strip, and repeat that on the other side. Now we're going to take this strip over to our sewing machine and stitch 1/8 inch from this double folded sort of open edge to seal it all closed into one strip. Make sure to backstitch at each end. All right, now we have our strip fully created. I'm just going to set that aside. We're going to return to this quite a few steps later. For now, the next thing I'm going to do is work on my front pockets. If you're doing view A or B and you're making these front pockets, we're going to start by adding our binding to them. So this binding was cut on the straight grain so that it helps us not have the pocket warp out and stretch over time, because our pocket line is cut on the diagonal. So we're going to, with right sides facing, we're going to put one raw edge of our binding strip aligned with the raw edge of our pocket diagonal. Make sure that you have your pockets facing mirrored directions and you don't accidentally put the binding on the same side as the other pocket. So I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine. You can pin it if you'd like. And we're going to straight stitch 1/4 inch from the raw edge, back stitching at each end. And repeat this stitch over on your other pocket as well. Now for each pocket piece, press the seam allowance and the binding strip outward away from the pocket. So I have my right side facing up right now, wrong side of my bias strip, and I'm going to press that bias strip sort of up and away from my pocket. So now its right side is facing. And I'm going to flip my pocket piece over. So now all wrong sides are facing up. And I'm going to take this binding piece and flip it over about 1/4 inch so that the raw edge matches up with that stitching line that I just made in the previous step. Now I'm going to turn it one more time by about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Just enough so that our original stitching line is now tucked just inside on the wrong side of our pocket. You can pin this in place, and then we're going to take it over to our sewing machine and stitch as close to that inner folded edge as we can to tack this down. And we're going to backstitch at each end. Go ahead and repeat these same steps on your second pocket piece. I'm going to give this a final press from the right side to get everything laying nice and flat. Trim off any little bits on the end where our binding was a little long. Now I'm going to take these front pocket pieces over to my serger and serge just this long edge here. If you don't have a serger, just go ahead and run a zigzag stitch along this long line. All right, now we're going to take our pocket with wrong side facing up, and we're going to fold that edge we just finished, that long edge, and fold it under by about 1/4 inch, and repeat that for your other pocket. Now we're ready to attach our pockets to our pant front pieces. I'm working with particularly wrinkly linen today, so if you are too, just make sure to iron frequently. We want to make sure that there aren't any wrinkles at this stage, especially on our pant front, because we don't want any wrinkles to sort of be trapped under our pocket. We want it all really nice and flat. Now, I find this part to be really satisfying. I'm going to take my pocket front pieces and align them onto my pant front. So I'm aligning the bottom raw edge, this short side edge, and my top edge. You want to make sure that your shorts front piece is running very parallel, that you don't have it sort of like warped in some crazy direction when you put your pocket piece on. We want the grain line of the shorts to be running square with that top edge and parallel with our pocket long edge right here. Once you have your pocket placed, go ahead and pin all the way around. And then we're going to take this over to our sewing machine and stitch 1/8 inch around all of the edges except the pocket opening. Go ahead and repeat all these steps over on your other pant front piece. All right, now we have our front pockets on. We're going to go ahead and add our butt pocket if you're going to be adding one. And I'm just going to look for my little pocket placement dot that I drew on there. And for my pocket piece, if you have a serger, go ahead and serge around all 4 edges. If you don't have a serger, you can do a zigzag stitch and fold under 1/2 inch. Or you can, for really secure seams, double fold each edge by 1/4 inch. I'm going to go ahead and serge around all 4 edges, then fold them in by 1/2 inch. So now I have my piece that's been serged around all 4 edges. I'm just going to turn it under 1/2 inch. Now this is a perfect square, so you can either choose which side you want to be the top, or if your fabric's all one material, it doesn't really matter. If it's all one color and no pattern or stripes, then it doesn't really matter which side the top is. Now we're going to go ahead and stitch 1/8 inch as close as we can from that inner edge there across our top, whatever you've chosen to be your top, and backstitch at each end. So right now we just have that top edge of our pocket stitched. The other 3 edges are folded under. And I'm going to put our pocket piece on our pants back piece. So on our pants back, we have the right side facing up and the wrong side of our pocket facing the pants. And I'm just going to align my pocket with the pocket placement dots that I've put on my pants pattern. And I just want to also make sure that my pants below it are very straight, that the grain line is running very straight up and down and parallel with the edges of my pocket. So once I've placed it where I want it, you can also play around with where you'd like your pocket to be. Give it one quick iron, and then I'm going to pin it in place. Now over on my sewing machine, I'm going to stitch 1/8 inch away from all of these 3 edges, leaving my top edge open. I am going to add little triangle stitch, like a triangle of stitches up at the top right and left corners just to sort of reinforce and hold this pocket in place a little bit more durably. And this one's pretty small, but you can sort of see that reinforcement there, how it turned out in the corner. All right, all pockets have now been attached if you're doing pockets on yours. And the next thing we're going to be doing is finally attaching our pant front to our pant back at the inseam. So that's this short seam right here below the crotch. So with right sides facing of my pant back and my pant front, pin along this short edge here, and we're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at each end, and then go ahead and just finish it with your serger or a zigzag stitch. Repeat those same steps on your other pant leg. Now I'm going to press that line, stitching line that we just did. I'm going to press that seam allowance toward the back pant leg. If you're going to be doing a view A or C with the ruffle hem, then we're going to be adding the ruffle hem right now. If you're doing views B or D with the straight cuff hem, we're going to return to that in a couple steps from now. So just hold tight, and you're welcome to, for views B and D, skip forward to the next step. For our ruffle hem, now you could cut these ruffle strips on the selvage edge of your fabric, which is just that kind of frayed but bound edge that the manufacturer puts there. The selvage edge sometimes on linen can be really pretty and like a faux fray look, and it's actually super durable. So that's how I usually make these shorts, but today I'll show you if you don't have a pretty or like a long enough piece or something of the selvage edge, you can also just hem your strip by doing a tiny little rolled hem. So fold it up the tiniest amount that you can. Anywhere from like an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch is great, and press it with your iron. Now we're going to just fold that up one more time. Again, as tiny as you can go, 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch. Use lots of steam if you're working with something like linen or cotton to really press it into place. That way you won't have to pin it over at your sewing machine. All right, so once we have this sort of double folded hemline here, we're just going to stitch 1/8 inch, or just honestly as close as you can get reliably on that inner fold to tack this hemline down. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning and at the end, and then you can go ahead and repeat all of these steps on your second ruffle strip. So we have our 2 ruffle strips now. They each have one long edge fully hemmed, and now we're going to want to run a basting stitch along the other long edge. So we're going to turn our machine settings to their longest stitch length and run a straight stitch about a 1/4 inch from the raw edge. We're going to back stitch at the very beginning, run all the way down, and when we get to our second end, we're just going to run straight off the edge, no back stitching, and leave ourselves about 6 inches of thread tails. Go ahead and repeat this for your second ruffle strip as well. All right, now I'm going to show you how to add our ruffles to the bottom hem of our pants. So I have my shorts facing up, and I'm going to overlay my ruffle strip here. So it's right sides facing with the pants. And I like to, because I have a soft ironing surface beneath me that I can actually dig pins into. I'll show you a little trick of how I typically do this to space out my ruffles evenly. Is I'll pin one end of my ruffles to the edge of the shorts, aligning this bottom corner. And I actually dig my pin through my ironing surface. If you have like an ironing board that's long enough to do this. And so I can't actually lift this up because it's now attached to my ironing surface, and that's just going to hold everything in place. I'll do the same thing over on the other side, aligning my bottom corner and actually digging in and through my ironing surface. And now, this is my loose tail end over here, so I'm going to add an anchor pin nearby going through my ironing surface. And I'm just going to grab the top thread. These are the ones where I didn't backstitch. I'm going to grab my top thread and I'm going to very gently pull. Now this goes for even if you aren't doing this pinning method like me. You just are going to still find that top thread on your loose stitch ends and gently pull it and use your other hand to sort of work the fabric and gather it. Now some people like to do 2 lines of stitching here for a little bit more durability, or let's say less of a chance of your pulling thread breaking. You do want to be very gentle. Ultimately, what we want, if you're doing my method here, we want to pull it so that the tension of our ruffle strip is now got us to the point where our ruffles are the same length as the bottom straight edge of our shorts. And so I'm to that point where my tension has got the exact same length. So I'm going to actually take that thread I was holding and just wind it around in a figure 8 pattern around my anchor pin here over on the side. That kind of gives me both hands free so that I can space my ruffles exactly how I want them and be able to really eyeball where I want everything to fall. I would suggest that you keep a little bit fewer ruffles, if any, right here by that inseam, because that's just going to be rubbing right in between your legs, and I think the excess fabric might feel like a little bit much. So let's bring all that party of the ruffles over to where we really want it. All right, I think I like where I have it. Now I'm going to come in with my iron and just press flat, straight down onto my ruffles. Really squish them flat up against our pants, so this will make it easier to sew through it in just a minute. I'm going to pin about every 3 or 4 inches to tack this in place. I'm going to remove my side pins from my ironing surface and just reintegrate them to hold that corner on my shorts. And now I'm ready to take this over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch 1/2 inch from that raw edge all the way along, back stitching at each end. Make sure that you turn your machine settings back to normal. So I usually use like 2.5 so as my stitch length. And then we're going to just serge or finish however you've been finishing all your edges. You can go ahead and repeat all of these steps on your other pant leg. All right, here's how that looks finished. And we just want to now press that seam allowance upwards away from the ruffles. So with the right side of the fabric facing up, I use my fingers to sort of ensure that that seam allowance is pointing upwards and press all the way along. Now I'm going to take this back over to my sewing machine and do a straight stitch 1/8 inch from that seam line, back stitching at each end. All right, now we're ready to do our crotch seam. So I have, this is for all views, A, B, C, and D. So I have one of my pant legs facing right side up, and I'm going to do the other pant leg right on top of it, facing down. So they have right sides facing each other, and I'm just going to align my crotch point here at the inseam, align all of these raw edges around the curve, give it a few pins, and then over at my sewing machine I'm going to stitch around this curve with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitching at both ends, and then I'm going to finish the seam with my serger. All right, that's what that crotch seam looks like finished. Now we're going to do our side seams, but don't get confused here. We're not just stitching right here. That wouldn't be correct. So that would connect our front to our front. We actually have to sort of flip this open and reorient ourselves so that our waistline meets up, and now when you look at the shorts, they should actually look like a pair of shorts. I'm just going to line up those edges, pin, making sure that my ruffle line matches up from front to back. And I'm going to stitch with 1/2 inch seam allowance and then finish that edge with my serger. And then we're going to get to our cuff bottom hem for views B and D right after this. Now, if you did serging on your outer edge seams, just remember that this is actually the final bottom hem of our shorts. And so we want to tuck that serge thread. I know some people use like sort of fray preventative glue or any type of method works, but I like to tuck my threads back into themselves. So I'm just going to use this giant textile needle to poke my threads right back into the serging stitches I just made. Pull them up tight. All right, so here's how the side seam looks on the shorts with the ruffles, but I also have prepared for us here our shorts without the ruffles. This is gonna have the straight cuff hem, and I've already done the crotch, the inseam, and our side seam here. I'm doing these a fun color block, so I've got some yellow and blue in there. And now we're at the stage where we're ready to add our straight cuff if you're doing views B and D. So for our straight cuffs, we're going to go ahead and get, for each strip of fabric, we're going to fold it down with wrong sides facing. We're going to fold it in half lengthwise. And we're going to press with our iron to get a nice center crease there. Go ahead and unfold it. Now press up your bottom edge by about a little under a 1/2 inch, probably 3/8 inch will work great, but I always just eyeball it. All right, and then I'm going to flip this whole thing. I'm going to actually unfold that as well. And with right sides facing, I'm actually going to now fold it in half this direction. And so I have my two short edges on top of each other. I'm going to momentarily unfold that bottom 1/2 inch, and I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine and stitch with 1/2 inch seam allowance down the short edge, back stitching at each end. Go ahead and repeat all of these steps for folding and stitching the short edge on your second straight hem as well. Now we're going to go ahead and press that seam open and then use our fingers to sort of repress that 1/2 inch fold back up. Now we're ready to connect our cuffs to our pant leg hem here. With the right side of our cuff facing the wrong side of our pocket, we're going to sort of put it on like a ring around our pant leg. And we're going to align the seam that we pressed open with our inseam, and just start by pinning that in place, lining the raw edges of our cuff with the raw edges of our pant leg. You can sort of do this with your fingers to ensure that your cuff is the same total width as your pant leg, and start just working your way around, adding pins. Stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the circle here and backstitch at each end. But we don't need to finish it with a serger or anything this time, because these raw edges are going to get tucked into our cuff. Go ahead and repeat all of these steps over on your second pant leg. Now I have my 1/2 inch seam allowance sewn all the way around the circle of each pant leg opening, and what I'm going to do now is take that cuff and fold it downwards away from the pants. So now the right side of the fabric is facing up on the cuff, still the wrong side on the shorts. And I'm going to take that seam allowance that we just created and make sure that it is pointing downward away from the shorts in the same direction as the cuff. And I'm going to come in with my iron and press really well to push everything down and away. And repeat that over on the second leg's cuff. All right, now we're ready to turn onto the right side of our shorts. So I'm going to turn my shorts right side out. And now I'm going to follow that center crease line that we created a few steps ago when we were making our cuff. And fold that whole cuff upward. And what's going to happen is we have that little 1/2 inch fold that we created earlier. And that 1/2 inch fold is going to tuck right on top of our seam line from attaching the cuff to the shorts. And we want that fold to lie just so that it is, the edge of the fold is just past that seam line so that we're covering the seam line and can't see it. I'm going to start by pinning again over here at my inseam just to make sure that that seam lines up. Pin all the way around the front and the back on both legs. Then we'll go ahead and take this over to our sewing machine and sew 1/8 inch or as close as you can get to that inner folded edge to tack it down to the shorts. All right, now we have both cuffs finished and here's how it looks after it's all been sewn. Now we have the cuff area, the bottom hem finished on both pairs of shorts. And for all versions, A, B, C, and D, now we're going to add in our drawstring exit holes. Now there's several methods that you can do for your waistband, for your drawstring exit holes. One of them, you could do a eyelet. So these are like little circular metal fasteners that you can put in if you have the tools for that. Another option is to do a simple buttonhole right here. Today I'll show just how to do the buttonhole method. So I have my spots marked here. We want to be making buttonholes that are about 1/2 inch openings. So if you have a 1/2 inch button, you can place that in your buttonhole maker. If you have a buttonhole maker like this one. You can also hand stitch buttonholes, but this tool on your sewing machine can help it go a little bit faster. So you could either put a 1/2 inch button here or take your ruler and just measure out what would be a 1/2 inch to fit inside that buttonhole. And you can see this part slides in and out. So you just want to slide it to the point that measures about 1/2 inch, maybe a little more. Remember that our drawstring that we made is a 1/2 inch. So we want it to be at least big enough for our drawstring to fit through that. If you want even sturdier buttonhole areas, you can go ahead and add fusible interfacing to the back of your buttonholes. I think it's probably better to add this fusible interfacing before you sew your buttons. I just forgot, so I'm plopping mine on right here, right now. Now I'm ready to cut open my buttonholes. I'll show you 2 ways to do this. One is to take a sharp pair of scissors and just snip out that buttonhole opening. Another way to do this is to place a pin at one end of the buttonhole, right about where that stitching starts at the very edge. And then take your seam ripper and start at one end and rip straight up. And it should hopefully get caught on that pin there and not rip all the way through your stitching. We are ready to attach our top waistband. We're actually going to do it very similar to how we did the cuff on view B and D. So I'm going to, with wrong sides facing, I'm going to fold my long strip in half lengthwise and press with my iron. Now I'm going to open this strip back up and I'm going to fold the bottom edge up toward the wrong side by about 1/2 inch and press with my iron all the way across. Now we're ready to turn this into this circular loop to become a waistband. I'm going to connect these two, I'm going to overlap our 2 short ends of our strip and temporarily unfold that bottom 1/2 inch fold that we had there. Pin this together and stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance right down here. Now we'll press this seam open and then refold that bottom 1/2 inch fold that we made earlier. To connect this to our shorts, we want to turn our shorts inside out and we're going to insert our shorts into our waistband with the right side of the waistband facing the wrong side of the shorts. And what I really want to do is align this back center seam of my waistband to the back rise seam, the back center seam of our shorts. Now you can sort of use your fingers to even this all out. Let's go over to our front and try our best to center that center line and line that up with our center front seam of our shorts. Pin all the way around with 1/2 inch seam allowance. We don't need to finish it with any serging because it's going to be tucked into that waistband in just a moment. All right, we've stitched all the way around. That's what that looks like finished. Now I'm going to take my waistband and turn it out and away from my shorts. And I want that seam allowance that we just created to also be pointing out and away from the shorts. So I'm just going to use my fingers to sort of manipulate that a little bit and press with my iron. Now we're ready to turn the shorts right side out, and we're going to sandwich all this messy seam allowance inside of our waistband. So I'm going to turn my waistband down, and hopefully you still have that crease that we formed when we folded the whole thing in half lengthwise way earlier. And so that crease is going to help guide us become the top edge of our waistband. And then our little 1/2 inch fold that we made is going to fall right over that line of stitching that we made in the just before this, just so that it becomes invisibly hidden behind it. Now I'm going to go ahead and pin all the way around my waistband and stitch 1/8 inch, or as close as you can reliably get, to that inner fold edge there. Because we have these drawstring exit holes, we don't need to leave any openings on the side, which is great. So we're going to stitch all the way around. However, if you chose not to do the drawstrings on your pair, so you don't have these drawstring exit holes, then you need to make sure you leave an opening of about 1 inch or so at one of your side seams so that you'll be able to insert the elastic in the next step. All right, here's how that looks finished. Now I like to add some more, you could call this somewhat decorative stitching. It's not totally necessary, but I think it adds some more good, yummy texture at the top of your waistband. So I'm going to add a line of stitching all the way around, about 3/8 inch from my bottom, my inside fold of my waistband down here. And I want that line to run just across, hitting just the bottom edge of my buttonholes. And then I'm going to run another line of stitching near the top, about 3/8 inch from the top fold of my waistband. And now this time we're going to hit just across the top of our buttonholes, going all the way around. And then wherever I do my back stitching, I like to do that on, like, start and stop my lines either on a side seam or a back center seam, just so that they're a little bit less visible in my final product. Now we're ready to add in our elastic and our drawstring into our waistband. So we're going to start with our elastic. And for my elastic, I like to mark the tops, or like one side of my elastic. If it was laying flat, I mark the top of it on each end, just so that I can see later exactly when I'm coming through that I probably didn't twist it if both pencil marks are face up. Put a safety pin connected to the one end of my elastic, insert it through, and if you want to make sure that your elastic doesn't fly through and get lost in that channel as you pull it, you can just take a pin or a safety pin and sort of secure it to your shorts so that it can't get sucked in. Once you've made it to the front of your shorts, we're going to pull our safety pin back out through that very first exit hole that we started with. And we just want to make sure that we're careful to kind of feel with our fingers and make sure our elastic didn't twist. And it helps to confirm because I have my two pencil lines facing up on my elastic. So I know that I can sandwich them right on top of each other. And I'm going to overlap my elastic by about, I'd say 3/4 inch or so. Place a pin through it and pull out that elastic a little bit from the waistband so you have some space to be able to put this under your sewing machine. And we're going to sew a zigzag stitch, going over the same stitch multiple times back and forth to secure our two ends of elastic together. Now we can get that elastic tucked back inside of our waistband so it's all tucked away inside our casing. We're ready to add our drawstring. So similar technique, but this time I'm going to enter into one of my buttonholes, head in that direction all the way around, and come back out my other drawstring exit hole. I'm just going to pull and readjust that waistband, and then pull and readjust it until I get my two front drawstrings even with each other. All right, that's pretty good. Take off my safety pin, and that's it, and voila! Woohoo! You did the thing. I'm so proud of you for getting all those crazy pieces to where they needed to be, and I hope you enjoy so many fun adventures while wearing these shorts. And if you get any photos in them, please do upload them as a review on the product page, or just shoot me an email and say, hi, this is what I made. I'll be so excited to see it and share in the joy of these shorts with you. If you enjoyed this experience, check out the rest of my pattern collection over at charliedarwintextiles.com/patterns, and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can get more sewing tutorials and behind the scenes of my handmade linen clothing business.